well, is how do you conduct yourselves with wisdom toward pro-choice people in this case, or perhaps people of a different faith or people who believe something different from you. I want to help the pro-life movement to become more loving as well as more persuasive. And as just a quick setup for this, I just want to say dialogue is super hard right now about topics that people disagree on. I think harder than it has been, well, any time that I've been aware of in the last 15 years. And so these dialogue tips are going to optimize your chances of having a good dialogue, and arguably are more important to use now than ever before. So it's not a reason to not listen to them, but I will tell you, you might have some rough dialogues this year because everybody's crazy this year. Okay, like I've had some really bad experiences trying to talk to people this year. I just think everyone's a little bit nuts with the election, with COVID. It's been a really hard year for a lot of people. And even if you have some rough dialogues, I want to encourage you, don't give up. I think it's going to get better. I think it's going to get better next year. But again, these dialogue tips are going to help kind of just improve your chances of someone being able to drop their guard. Because the goal here is we don't want people's defenses up, like having walls up between you, or else they're not going to be able to hear you. So a lot of these tips, when we're trying to figure out in our work on college campuses what is working and what is not, trying to figure out how do I quickly, as a stranger, as a pro-life, not to mention white, male, cis, straight, dude, how do I get their walls down so they can even hear what I have to say? It doesn't matter how good my arguments are if they're not hearing me. And so today isn't about the arguments. We'll get into the arguments in the next couple of days. Today is just about how do you get their walls down so they can hear anything that you have to say. So I'm going to go through, I think, probably like 7 tips. I'll try to be fairly brief, as well as talking about an attitude that we all need to break if we want to have really good conversations. It's arguably the most important point, but I'll save the best for last. I'm going to start with a couple of more obvious ones. These are things like you just got to do in every conversation if you want to go well. Number 1, ask a lot of clarification questions, because you don't know what this other person thinks. But when you talk about something a lot, if you're one of these people like Liberty who talks about abortion a lot, it's very easy for Liberty and me to just kind of subconsciously expect that we know what the other person thinks because they're saying things that we've heard before. And then we kind of go into a little bit of autopilot. It's like our experience sort of becomes the enemy a little bit there. And then we make assumptions about this person that aren't really justified. Just because we've heard 50 other people say that thing doesn't mean this person's coming from the same direction or means the same thing or has the same views. And so you want to ask a lot of clarification questions. What do you mean by that? You called yourself pro-choice. I'm not sure what that means to you. I've heard that label used dozens of different ways. So I know less than nothing right now. Like flesh that out for me. What is that? When you call yourself pro-choice, what does that mean? You can't offend me. Just like, what does that mean to you? And I might have to ask them some specific clarification questions. Do you guys know how good Sherilyn Smith's headshot is? That is a beautiful picture. Okay, I'm just like so distracted. That's great. I'm just like, as a photographer, I'm like, that was a great picture. Okay, anyway. Okay, what was I talking about? Asking clarification. So I might have to prompt them with questions to help them help me. So I might ask things like, or do you believe abortion should be legal for all 9 months, or do you think it should be less than that? Like, where are you at on the timing? I might ask them about circumstances, like, are there cases where you think abortion should not be legal? Should they all be legal? What if they want to have an abortion because it's a girl and they really didn't want to have a girl? Like, I'm prompting them with some options, and I'm looking for common ground because I really want to find common ground as soon as possible. I'll talk about that in a minute. But even in my clarification questions, sometimes I am hunting for common ground because it's going to make the dialogue so much better, especially if I can start with some common ground. So ask clarification questions. It's like the anti-straw man. You don't want to straw man people, which is when you attack a dumber argument than the one that they are making or thinking of. And so the best way to inoculate against that is to don't make your argument, your counter argument to something they say until you've asked some questions and you really understand. In fact, if you want bonus points, then rephrase what you hear them saying. Rephrase their argument to the point that they respond, yep, that's exactly it. In fact, you put it better even than I could. Like, that is like the gold standard. Once you've done that, then you can make your argument, and they're going to be all ears because they know you're not about to straw man them. You do understand where they're coming from, and you disagree, and they're going to be more curious as to why, because they know that you understand where they're coming from. So ask a lot of clarification questions. Also, silence your inner monologue. This is so hard to do, where you're always kind of wanting to think, especially when you're in person with a person. If you're having like a Facebook debate or an email exchange or something, this is easier because you can take your time. But when you're in person, imagine back when you got to be in person with people, then it's like you kind of want to respond right away. You know, you want to like, you don't want to make pro-life people look dumb or something. So you don't want to take a breath or make it look like you've been stumped. You want to like be right back there with the debate, because the people that we enjoy watching debates can do that. If you watch Ben Shapiro, he doesn't have to take a second to think. He's got 50 statistics he's memorized, you know, that he's like ready to go on every topic. You know, he's just like ready to go. But in our real world dialogues, that doesn't work as well. Because if I'm thinking about the argument that I want to make next, or maybe what's the next question I even want to ask, if I'm not even ready to make an argument yet, then that's what I'm really thinking about. I'm not hearing them. I'm more in my head, like, oh, what should I do next? And everyone does that. Like, I get it. It's like, it's really, really hard not to do. But it's really important, because if they might say something really, really important, like you might miss, and then therefore straw man them, or maybe just annoy them, because people can kind of tell when you're not listening. When you're like, you know, your eyes start gazing around or whatever. It's like people can tell what you're doing. And so really listen to them. Yeah, literally, you're going to your phone every once in a while because someone's texting you. You're checking your smartwatch, like, oh, what's going on there? I've done that before. I've told that story at your conferences before, where I used to go home and my wife would be telling me about her day, and I would be like browsing Facebook on my phone. And it's so bad. We all know that's bad. And she knew it was bad. And I know now that it was bad. Don't do that, because it's not really listening. You also, as I said, you want to find common ground as often as possible. Genuine common ground, not fake common ground, just to like make the conversation go better. But you're going to have a lot of common ground with most people that you talk to. Most pro-choice people I talk to, they don't think abortion should be legal through all 9 months. They think some abortions should even be illegal. They think some abortions are really wrong. They think abortion hurts women sometimes. Like, there's all these different things that we can agree on. And it's just little moments where you can kind of point out, oh yeah, I'm with you there. I like what you said there. That just helps smooth out the conversation. It helps it go better than they're expecting it to go. Because they're expecting it to go terribly, because they're probably living in confirmation bias land, like pretty much all of us are. And so they're only listening to, you know, MSNBC and whatever pro-lifers they feature on MSNBC, which are not the best of the pro-lifers, okay? And so they're expecting a terrible conversation. And then they get to talk to reasonable, kind Liberty Pike. And it's just so different than what they're expecting. And it's like a huge advantage. It's like that advantage where, you know, they expect you to be dumb, but you're actually smart, that you see in, like, you know, Sherlock Holmes type shows. Like, that's an advantage. Well, it's also an advantage for them to be expecting something bad, and then for them to be super intrigued by you because you're not the stereotype. You're just a loving, nice, pro-life person, and you're interested in their views, and you're open-minded, and you're trying to seek truth, and it's just not what people do. So do all of those things. Okay, say what you don't mean. It is so easy for other people to misunderstand us and straw man us, and we want to minimize how often that happens. So we like to make clarity completely our responsibility. My view is not like, well, it's 50-50. That's half my responsibility, half them. No. I expect I'm going to be a lot better at dialogue than they are, and I've thought a lot more about this than I am. This is not an even fight when I'm debating a pro-choice person. I can make their argument better than they can 9 times out of 10. So it's not a fair fight. And so I'm going to take all that responsibility on myself. which means I'm going to try to be as clear as I can about what I'm saying, as well as trying to make sure I'm being extra clear about how I'm perceiving or understanding what they're saying. And so sometimes sort of identifying potential straw men, ways that they might be misunderstanding the words you're saying right now, and then sort of cutting that off at the pass and just saying, here's what I'm not saying. For example, you might say, I don't think it's as wrong to kill an animal as it is to kill a human. I'm not saying it doesn't matter how we treat animals. I'm not saying like we can just go kick dogs just because they're not human. That's not what I'm saying at all. That would be really wrong. I think it's really wrong to like torture animals. I'm just saying they're not equal to us. They still matter. We should still treat them well, but they're not equal. Or I think it's as wrong to kill a human embryo as it is to kill a human toddler because they're equally human. But I'm not saying that a woman who has an early abortion is sinning as greatly as a woman that strangles her toddler. Don't get me wrong, it's a really bad sin and it's terribly destructive, but I think you have a different level of malice if you are like in your right mind strangling a toddler to death. Like that's just different than if you hire someone to kill a baby that you don't even think it's a baby and that you can't see. It's just a different thing when it comes to culpability. Similarly, it would be easier to push a button that you know will kill someone halfway around the world than it would be to strangle them with your own hands. Like, it's just going to be a different situation. So it doesn't mean that the two potential victims aren't equally valuable, equally deserving of protection. It's just we're bringing nuance into this. Don't you want more nuance in like every debate that people are having right now? We're bringing nuance into this instead of oversimplifying everything. I'll give you one more example. Here's what I'm not saying. I am not saying that moral relativists cannot be kind, moral people. What I am saying is that moral relativism cannot explain why anyone should be moral. That's a different thing. I don't believe the one thing. I do believe the other thing. So if you disagree with me, come back at me. Like, I would love to understand why I'm wrong. But I'm not saying that atheists can't be nice people. Most of my atheist friends are nicer than a lot of my Christian friends. I'm totally with you. I get it. You don't have to, like, argue that to me. I'm with you. Help me understand why relativism can explain objective morality. That doesn't make sense to me. Maybe I'm wrong. Come back at me. Help me understand. So say what you don't mean. And another thing, this is like, I think one of the points that I'm proudest of talking about because it's really unique to our team as we put this together. It's very different than our colleagues that we respect a lot. But we teach people to avoid making arguments that end with a question mark. So you're going to be listening to them, they're talking, you're asking some clarification questions, and at some point, you've earned the right to make an argument, right? To respond with your view. And my view is that generally speaking, when you do that, it should end with a period. Just make your argument, but don't try like a leading question that's meant to kind of corner them. Because that's what a lot of apologists teach, is to ask a question that at least seems leading to them. It might be a literally leading question, or it might not be, but if my view is it's going to feel leading to them. And if when people feel like you're leading them somewhere, they shut down. The walls go up instead of down because they don't know where you're going and they don't trust you. They don't want to lose. They're probably in fight mode. It's really like you got to get people out of fight mode where they're having a real dialogue and you're both seeking truth. That's rare. So you're trying to get them to do that. But if they're still in fight mode and you're like, well, okay, first I want to ask you some questions. Wouldn't it be wrong if someone did this? And then wouldn't it be wrong if they did this too? And then they just like feel like they feel like the noose tightening. And it's like, I don't know where you're going with this, but I don't want to answer your questions because I think you're setting me up. You're setting me up in a trap. And so we don't want to do that. Instead, we want to recommend just like make your argument. You don't want to make the person feel Socratized. And by the way, it's been really interesting. I've been teaching this for 5 or 6 years now. And I've had salespeople come up to me and tell me, yeah, we've been learning this in sales. Like I've got a donor who's a pharmaceutical rep. And he's like, this is what we've all been learning in our training. Is like at this point, like the old sales techniques don't work anymore. It's not subtle anymore. People can see right through it. when you're sort of like pretending to be their friend. We have to do the harder thing now. We have to really learn what their problems are. And only if we actually think we can solve it with a product can we like get into it and earn that trust. I've had family therapists tell me the same things. It's like when I do couples therapy, like I'm having them do the same thing. I'm not letting them do leading questions. You just have to explain what they're feeling or ask clarification questions. So I'll give you kind of just one story about this that kind of gives you a sense of how powerful this can be. So my brother and I, a long time ago, we had a series of 15 meetings with the same Mormons in my living room, the same LD, people from the LDS church. I don't want to be called Mormon anymore. It's just one of these things that started really organically. There was this one Saturday I was at home. It's like my first Saturday at home in several weeks. I was finally like resting and the doorbell rings and I open the door and it's Mormons, and it's just like, and I didn't want to talk to anyone that day, much less people of a different religion. And like, I'm embarrassed to say I cared more about my rest in that moment than their souls. But luckily they were charming and pushy enough to get into my house and have a conversation with me. And it went really well. And then I invited them back. And then I kept inviting my brother there, which was really not fair. Just like to kind of like tag team them. But they were coming with 3 or 4 anyway. So anyway, whatever. But we kept on having them come back. And it was really good conversations. And so I remember this one time we ended up having 3 back-to-back meetings debating the Trinity. LDS people don't believe in the Trinity the way Christians do, classical Christians do. And the first time that we talked about the Trinity, we didn't get very far. It kind of looked the way Christians often look when they're debating a religious topic with each other. And I don't know if you've ever experienced something like this, where it's like, well, here's my Bible verse. And then we're like, yeah, well, what about this Bible verse? It's like, okay, well, I like this Bible verse now. And then it's like, no. There's a way different book of the Bible, but this Bible verse is this. And we're just like lobbing proof texts at each other. And we weren't getting very far. It's like they weren't really interacting with our proof text. They were just giving us alternative ones, right? And so I remember right before they came back for the second meeting where we had agreed, let's keep on talking about the Trinity. I had this idea that I talked about with Tim in the kitchen before they got there. And I just said, like, what if we did this thing where we kind of offer to change it up and do this kind of more like, you guys do your research and pick your best verses, and we'll give you our best verses next time too. And we'll let like the best verses battle it out. And what if we just like gave them our best verses right now so they can like study up on everything before they come back the third time? And he was like, yeah, it's a good idea. So ultimately it was Tim that ended up doing it, where he basically said at the end of the meeting, he's like, all right, well, this has gone a lot like I feel like the last meeting went. There's not enough interaction. Like, we're not really debating the verses. We're just like lobbing them at each other. So let's do this. I want to have let's do one more meeting on the Trinity next time in a couple of weeks. But let's do this different. Let's do this David and Goliath story, David and Goliath style. You bring your strongest 2 verses, and we'll bring our 2 strongest verses, and we'll let them duke it out. And we'll see who seems to have the better view from that. And we'll just talk about those verses. And so you can think about, like, you can kind of do your research and talk to your mentors or pastors or whatever, and kind of get all prepared for that. And then Tim said, here's the thing. I'm going to give you my 2 verses right now. Get out a pen. And one of them whips out a little pad of paper, like this little notebook, like pocket notebook thing, and a pencil so fast. I'd never seen it before. He'd never taken notes before in these meetings, but he whips this thing out. And Tim starts explaining his verses. And he's writing them down, like you can see smoke like coming up from the pencil, like he's writing every word down. And I'm watching them, and they're at the edge of my couch. All 3 of them are sitting and listening more attentively than I've ever seen in the, I think 10 previous meetings or something. Like this was meetings like 11 through 13, yeah, like 10 previous meetings. They were like full on attention. And here's why. No one does this anymore. This is not how people debate. This is not like, if presidential debates happen this year, I don't know what's going on, but like if Trump and Biden do a debate, they're not going to be doing this like beforehand, like behind the blue curtain. Hey, Biden, I don't get to be impressive. But here, hey, Biden, here's like some of the things that I'm planning on saying about you and the names I'm going to call you. And then here's Biden. And he's like, well, here's the things that I'm going to say. Like, they're not doing that. That's not what people do because people are trying to win debates. But this isn't a debate. We were having a dialogue. We're having a series of dialogues, really in this kind of more like a relational apologetics context. We're really getting to know each other and building rapport. And it's like, we didn't want to win the Trinity debate just because we were quicker on our feet. Like, we were way better debaters than them. It wasn't a fair fight in that way. But that's not why I don't want them to feel like that's why they lost. It's like, let's give them as much advantage over us as possible. Go ahead. Go and do research and figure out your awesome responses to our verses and come back and let's just talk. And we're chill, like whatever. Let's just have the conversation. And they came back and we had a way better conversation about the Trinity. But that's like the attitude, the approach here when we have our dialogues is the worst poker strategy ever. There's nothing up my sleeves. Here's all my cards face up on the table. You get everything. I'm not holding anything back. Now help me understand why I'm wrong. Maybe the cards are wrong, but like, here's what they are. Help me understand why you disagree. And people's defenses go down because you're being genuine and you're being transparent, which especially for young people right now, that is what they need to build trust with you. Young people are so stinking skeptical of everything right now. This has been like, there's research on this. Sociologists have shown that Gen Z is more skeptical of just any facts that people are giving them, like even like marketing, like advertisements and stuff. They're more skeptical than any generation previous. And so when they find me on a campus and I have a conversation with them and I'm acting like this, I'm just like, hey, I'm just interested in what you have to say. What do you think about this? And I listen a lot and show them with my body language that I'm listening. And I ask them clarification questions and then I kind of say, well, I think what you're saying is this. Or maybe I might even give them a better argument. I'll be like, there's even like a stronger version of that some people say where they'll kind of do this twist. They'll be like, ooh, I like that. Okay, yeah, so I'm going to go with that. Okay, cool, that's great. And then at some point they're like, well, what do you think? Like, I'm so interesting to them because I'm different. This is not how people act. And I'm like, oh, well, here's where I'm coming from. And I'll tell you kind of how I respond to that tomorrow. That's tomorrow's thing. But I'll give them my kind of main pro-life argument in a couple of minutes. And we'll have it back and forth. And a bunch of the time they become pro-life right there because I've built up all this rapport. They like who I am as a person. And then I give them an argument that is stunningly persuasive. And if they're open-minded at all, a lot of times they just become pro-life right there. But it's like I've been building up all this rapport before I've even talked. Or made my argument by doing all of these other things. Okay, 2 real quick other tips before we jump into Q&A. One of them, I know Liberty really wanted me to talk about this. I don't usually add this as a dialogue tip, but it's really important. And it's something we've been talking about for a long time. And it's this idea of avoiding what I call fetus tunnel vision. You know, a lot of times I make a joke at the beginning of talks, and probably half of you have heard me make this joke, which is why I didn't start today with it. But we'll make this joke about how we try to help pro-lifers to not be weird. We have this motto, DBW, don't be weird, you know, kind of a thing. And so sometimes people ask me, like, give me an example of weird. What does pro-life weird look like? And this is my go-to example. It's not the only one, but this is my go-to example of weird pro-life tendencies. And this is not like, I'm not speaking ill of anyone. Like, I don't think people realize why it's weird, but it's very off-putting when they do it. And so what fetus tunnel vision is the inability to see and or acknowledge human rights and justices without equating or comparing them to abortion. So, common example, you'll see this Facebook post every September. Do you know 2,977 people died on 9/11? but 3,300 babies are killed every day in abortion facilities. So why does everyone get so upset about the former and not the latter? The more you know, like that kind of thing. And I think they mean well. They are trying to help people who are rightfully like understanding that 9/11 is this huge tragedy and saying, it's like, there's that many babies getting killed every day. Like, why are we, they're coming from a good place. The problem is the method. Because one, you're not going to persuade a lot of people to become pro-life while comparing every single instance of multiple people dying to abortion. I've seen people do this with like school shootings. It's like a school shooting happens, or the movie theater shooting that happened, you know, when The Dark Knight came out and that like Joker costume wearing guy shot up like 20 or 30 people. Like, it's like that day, you know how many people Planned Parenthood in that city killed that day? Like that kind of thing. And the problem is,
well, and everybody's doing it right now because of COVID, right, Josh? I've been seeing that a lot too.
Yes.
People saying
Please.
150,000 lost to COVID, but 1 million this year to abortion. Just,
they're
do you ever want to compare?
I mean, it's a pandemic. It's just a pandemic. No one's trying to kill anyone. This is, I don't think pro-lifers should be saying much about COVID that relates it to abortion. And I am so in the minority on that. I know I'm in the minority on that, and you know, okay, but I just think it's really off-putting. Like I want, when I'm talking, even on social media, I know I've got pro-choice friends watching. And I might not have a conversation with them today about abortion, but I still want to be like priming the pumps. I want them more likely to have that conversation with me down the road. And if I am super off-putting on some other topic, or if I'm like, I love every single thing President Trump says. He is just the most awesome, kind person I've ever heard in the White House. Like, you're just burning so many bridges and you're not aware of it. And I'm not saying you shouldn't vote for Trump. I'm not saying that. See, I'm doing that thing. Here's what I'm not saying. I'm not making, this is not a political thing. I'm just saying he's not known to be the kindest president ever. Like, it'd be hard to disagree with me on that. And so, like, but what you say matters, and will affect your future chances with people, whether you like it or not. So if you, every time you hear about something bad happening, you compare it to your kind of pet issue, your issue that you're passionate about. And I'm not saying you shouldn't be passionate about it. You should be. But if that's what you do, then it's going to seem like you have a broken moral compass. Meaning, like, you have a moral compass that doesn't point true north. It's skewed. It's off. It's super weighted toward just this one thing. And that's a problem. Because if people think your moral compass is broken, they're not going to be able to take your moral views seriously. Like, they can't. It'd be like if, like, the leader, like the state leader of the KKK met with you and told you how you ought to think about some other issue. About, like, you know, here's what I think's really going on with climate change. Like, if you're like me, I'm going to have a harder time taking his views seriously because he's so backwards on racism. And, like, that's so obvious that we shouldn't treat people differently because of their ethnicity or their skin color. And if he's so backward on that, it's going to be hard to take his views seriously about something more subtle. Yes, Liberty. Oh,
I think that what has helped me and might help some of the other people listening is to apply it to ourselves specifically, because the pro-choice people do this to pro-life people. They say that your opinion about abortion doesn't matter because you haven't adopted any kids. You're not a foster parent. Do you support wars, moral or immoral, just or unjust? Do you support the death penalty? Like, they think of every way possible to invalidate our position on one thing because we don't agree with them about another thing, or they're assuming we don't. And I think the point is that we just need to remember how complex human beings are, and that we can care and be upset about multiple things at one time. And what we choose to spend our time and invest our energy on is different. Josh and I and Lois, Sherilyn, other people who work at Oregon Right to Life, and I'm sure a lot of people on the call, our number one issue when it comes to human rights is abortion. That is our, if you build a pyramid, you know, like the nutritional pyramid, at the top is abortion, and that's what we spend our time on. But we can be upset about a lot of other things and even active in a lot of other things, and it doesn't invalidate that. But what Josh is saying is when we compare everything that is upsetting to abortion, because that is our main thing, people think, oh, you don't care about anything else but abortion, which is not true. So just as it's not true for them to say your primary thing is abortion, so you don't care about the foster care problems, it's not true in the reverse. So we're just trying to help your wonderful empathetic hearts get across as well as possible by just avoiding this common pitfall, which it is hard to do because it is so upsetting to all of us on this call. I know that there are all these thousands of babies dying every single day, and we want to help you get that concern across. But we want to help you, and reason we have Josh is to help you guys get it across in a way that is going to be the most receptive by the most number of people. Does that help?
And this shows how well Liberty understands this, because that was like exactly the point that I was about to make, which is that, like, I've never heard a pro-life person actually say that we shouldn't mourn other tragedies. That's not the problem. The problem is we sometimes need some help expressing the grief that we already have about other human rights violations. Because sometimes instead we might say something like, well, that's really sad, but also think about abortion, like kind of in the same comment. And then it doesn't really seem to other people. They have a hard time believing that you're truly sad about this other thing, even if you are. It's like, it's how spouses, if you've been married for longer than a week, you know that you can be trying to communicate something. Doesn't mean the other person, and when they're trying to receive the radio waves, they're getting the same signal, right? And this is an example of that, is how do we make sure that people understand what we're trying to get across? And sometimes it is fine to just grieve some horrible thing and not say anything about abortion in that comment. Like, that is okay, and will probably help people to take your views about abortion more seriously later. Because then they're going to start connecting the dots. They're like, oh, I've seen this person say that they're really upset about human trafficking. And I've heard them talk about how they're a foster parent. And I've heard them talk about how police brutality, like legitimate examples of police brutality, is a big problem. And they're really concerned about that. And so they're having conversations with their conservative friends about things like qualified immunity. And then, now they're talking about abortion. I see the pattern. They're concerned about innocent, vulnerable people being hurt. I can take that seriously because that it's consistent. They're a consistent person. It doesn't seem like they're all over the map. Final point, and then let's jump into Q&A. So if you have not posted questions, feel free to type in questions in the chat. So there's an attitude to break. And as I've been analyzing my social media dialogues lately, I've come to realize this might be the number one most important thing someone can do to make a dialogue go well, which is to demonstrate in the dialogue that they are an open-minded person. So when I say open-minded, here's what I don't mean. See, I keep on doing that thing. Here's what I don't mean. I don't mean being wishy-washy. I don't mean, you know, I'm just like, where's the wind blowing right now? Okay, that's my view. That's the politician thing. I'm not saying we should do that. I think we should believe things for good reasons. I don't think we should believe things just because that's what our parents taught us, or that's what, you know, our culture, you know, or most of the people who are in our political party think. I think we should try to like have a view on every issue based on good reasons, and be open-minded enough to know that you might have some wrong views right now, and you just don't know what they are yet. And you're constantly kind of on a journey to have more true beliefs and fewer false ones. And that really helps my dialogues, because when I tell someone that I'm open-minded, and demonstrate it by, for example, like the phrase that we use on our staff is like speaking open-minded ease. It's like the language of the open-minded person. There are just things that open-minded people say that typically closed-minded people don't say. Like things like, so I might be wrong about this, but what do you think about this? Like I've just said, I'm going to say a thing. This is my current view. I'm open to being wrong, but here's the thought. Come back at me. That makes them so much more interested and willing to come back at me because I think there might be a point. There might be a reason to come back, because I don't know if you've ever had experience talking to a super closed-minded person that is like, I am not going to change my mind no matter what you say or no matter what anyone says. I'm not interested in talking to that person. I don't know, like, what's the point? Outside of like, I don't know, maybe it's like an interesting intellectual exercise for me or something, but that's not usually that interesting to me. I want to talk to someone who is also open-minded, and we have the ability to, like, something might change at the end of this process. One or both of us might change, at least to some extent, about our views. And so, you know, I am constantly on the lookout. I'm reading people who think differently than me on a lot of topics, and because I'm trying to figure out what are the things that I'm still wrong about. I don't like being wrong, okay? So I want to figure those things out. And sometimes I agree with people on the right on a given subject, and sometimes I agree with people on the left on a different topic, and it just kind of depends. So I like when I do those websites where it's like, here, put in your views on different issues and we'll tell you who to vote for. Like, I am a mess for those websites because I'm kind of all over the map. It just depends on the issue. And there's a bunch of issues I don't even have a position on yet because I haven't studied it enough. I haven't earned up the right to have a position on a topic that I haven't really looked into yet. And so, but that makes it so much more easy for pro-choice people to talk to you, because they don't want to talk to a closed-minded person either. Just like you don't want to talk to a closed-minded pro-choice person, they don't want to talk to a closed-minded pro-lifer. And so if you can kind of demonstrate that you're an open-minded person and they could change your views, at least to some extent, then they're going to be more invested in the conversation, which is something that you're going to need if you want to be able to change their mind, because you're not going to usually change their mind in a couple of minutes. You're going to need time, which is why we talk about relational apologetics a lot. You might need a series of conversations with a friend who trusts you before they actually change their mind. So there you go. So to sum up, let's see, what did I do? I talked about asking clarification questions, silencing your inner monologue, finding genuine common ground when possible, rephrasing what they said and trying to get it to where, you know, you say, here's what I hear you saying, and they're like, yep, that's exactly what I'm saying. Cool, then you can move forward. Say what you don't mean, like I've done a half a dozen times today already. Avoid arguments with question marks. Just when it's time to make your argument, just make your argument, lay your cards out face up for them, and then avoid fetus tunnel vision and be open-minded and demonstrate that you're an open-minded person. All right, let's do Q&A.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Josh. I always learn something new when I listen to you. So
I did not know the don't make your arguments with a question mark at the end. So
really? You haven't heard me talk about that? It's one of my favorite things that we talk about. I'm so
Why have you been holding out on me?
Watch my course.
We had some people join kind of late, and we're going to get to questions that Lois has some now. But for the people that joined late, we are going to have a recording of this up on our YouTube later, and Josh has 2 more. It's not too late to sign up and have your friends sign up for tomorrow's and Thursday's sessions. All right, Lois, take it away.
Okay. I have a great question from Teresa. How do you respond to a woman who starts pouring out her personal story and trauma, hoping to convince you that situations like rape can justify abortion? How do you present your pro-life opinions without making them feel like you're insulting them personally for choosing to abort their child? Great question.
Such a good question. This is, I believe, one of the most complicated aspects of having a conversation about abortion. Like, I'm good, and I struggle with this. when I'm like in that moment in the real world thing, and I have, you know, a feminist with green hair, like simultaneously accusing me of being a bad person.
There's nothing
while
wrong with green hair. Josh is
you
not
can
saying there's
have
anything wrong
green
with
hair.
green hair.
I'm just saying it just happens to be that a lot of the people I'm talking about happen too, for some random reason. Uh, to be accusing me of being a terrible person, partially because I'm a dude, and simultaneously like dumping a lot of emotional baggage, like true stuff from her life on me in kind of a rhetorical way, but at the same time, those are real experiences. That is so complicated. So a couple of thoughts. One, anytime this topic of rape comes up, whether or not they say that they are a survivor of rape, I'm going to treat the conversation like they are, because frankly, so many women are. And I know that men can be raped too. It's just not what we're talking about in the context of abortion. So I'm talking about women who have been raped in this situation. It's so widespread. And I'm going to not make a pro-life argument right away. I'm not going to counter with an apologetics argument. I'm going to take some time and hear what they have to say. I'm going to demonstrate through my body language, through my facial expression, through the sounds that I'm making, that I'm with them. I hear them. I want to hear them. I want to honor what they're saying when they're not like attacking me or something like that. And then when it's time for me to talk, I'm just going to spend some time talking about how horrible rape is, because as obvious as it should be that everyone agrees on that, it's not obvious to them, especially if you're a guy. And so I'm going to take some time to, like, I think rape is one of the worst things that I know about. And I know people who have been through that experience. And just that knowledge kills me. And I think our society has a lot of room to grow when it comes to that topic. Like, I think a lot of people still put too much blame on the survivor of rape, on choices and decisions that she made, as opposed to kind of focusing most of that attention on the rapist, you know, the one who raped her. And I think our legal system is still trying to figure out the best way to handle the situation and balance what the survivor wants versus, you know, the importance of an accuser being able to, well, someone being able to face the accuser and all that. And that's really complicated. And, you know, there's a lot of police stations who are backed up on even testing, you know, the test after a rape and just like all kinds of problems. And if she gets pregnant as a result of the rape, then I think she's going to have to make one of the most difficult decisions of her life. In fact, I think the rapist at that point has committed multiple crimes, multiple moral crimes, where he's forced her to become a mother on top of the fact that he violated her. And now she's got to decide if she's going to carry to term and give birth to this baby, which is a long process, and childbirth is very painful, and then you have to keep the child, which is like this expensive 18-year commitment maybe she wasn't planning on, or maybe she might offer the child for adoption to a loving couple, which is a very selfless act, but it's very emotional, very emotionally difficult for most birth moms that go through that. Or she might hire someone to kill that baby. And I think you should go to jail for longer. I think you should be in jail for a very, 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 very long time. This is serious. But the reason that I'm against rape is related to this idea that there's this innocent victim that has been harmed. And one of the reasons why I'm against abortion is because I believe in that case there's an innocent victim that's been harmed. And so I'm not convinced that abortion should be legal in the case of rape. And I could explain why if you want, but it's not because I don't care about survivors of rape. I really, really do. And this is one of the parts of my view that make me the most uncomfortable. And kind of, I imagine you've got parts of your view that make you uncomfortable. This is one of the things that makes me uncomfortable because frankly, my heart goes out to the woman more than her baby. I just want to make everything better for the woman. That's like what's like going on for me. And I basically am willing to do just about anything to help her except for killing someone. I'm not willing to kill someone to make her feel better, but I'm willing to do just about anything else. So that's one, is you need to be able to respond well to the case of rape, whether or not they're a survivor. This means acknowledging how horrible it is, talking about that for a while to kind of convince them that you mean it, and then be able to still make your pro-life argument. If they're dumping a lot of emotional baggage, I think one of the things I'm trying to figure out in the moment is, are they doing this in kind of a malicious way? Meaning they're trying to like totally take control of the conversation, and they're just kind of doing this like rhetorical vomiting all over me kind of thing, and like overwhelm me in all these different arguments and all these distracting topics, or do they mean well, and like they just have a lot to get off their chests? I'm going to handle those situations differently. So part of our style at ERI is not to try to constantly take control of the conversation. This is just an area where I'm just different than some of my colleagues who I respect a lot, who will sometimes teach just like stay in the driver's seats, just stay in control. And I just don't think that works very well. I think young people resist that control, and I don't feel like I need that control to do well in the conversation. And so if we have to take a little sidetrack for a while because they decided to take this, scenic route, and they're just trying to share some of their views about other things and the things that they're really passionate about, I want to hear them. I want to find like whatever common ground I can, and then I'm going to make a judgment call about whether or not to try to make sure we get back to abortion. We have another motto at ERI. We've got two mottos. One of them is DBW. The other motto is every conversation is a series of difficult judgment calls amidst prayer without ceasing. Every conversation is a series of difficult judgment calls amidst prayer without ceasing. It's a judgment call. It depends on the person, depends on what's going on, depends on what I think is going on, and what I think is going to be best for them. And sometimes I don't force it back to abortion, and sometimes I do. If I think that they're being, like malicious isn't exactly the right word, but it's like they're trying to take control, that they don't have good intent. They're what philosophers call a bad actor. They're not acting with like good intent here. They're not in truth-seeking mode. They're in fight mode, and they're trying to control things. Then I'm gonna be more pushy and resist that more strongly. But I'm certainly like, if they're talking about their own experiences, I think rarely is it going to be the right move to kind of like cut them off. I'm going to hear what they have to say. And I'm going to respond if they've been attacking my character, sometimes at least. Like if they're, just like, I just think, people like you don't care about women and all you want to do is control their sex lives, and you want to punish them with babies because they had sex outside of marriage. And we're like, that's not at all true. That's not what's going on. I know that's what a lot of people think about pro-lifers, but I know a lot of pro-lifers, and that's not true of anyone that I know of. I'm not lying awake at night freaking out because college students are having premarital sex. Like, I don't think it's good for them, but if they're not a Christian, I also don't expect them to live like a Christian. So, that's part of the world. But I don't think that they should be allowed to kill people as a result of them living that lifestyle. And that's what I'm saying. I'm focusing on, I just don't want innocent people getting killed. This is not a slut shaming thing at all or something like that. I'm not trying to, I don't care, what you're doing. Like, this is not the point. And so there's all kinds of personal attacks that people make that I'll respond to. But it's judgment call territory.
Thank you, Josh. I really do feel like that particular topic is really worth the time that you took to share with us, because it really is one that we hear so much. And another thing is, you were talking that I try to remember is that I may not be the one that seals the deal with the person I'm talking with. So I always want to, that judgment call, it may be that we don't talk about we don't talk about abortion arguments, because whether they're talking with me next time or another pro-lifer, I want them to leave that conversation with the idea that I love them, that I took the time to acknowledge them as a valuable human being, and I may be handing them off to someone else who will actually, start that dialogue with them. But it is shocking sometimes to me, even though it shouldn't be, how willing people are to tell you the most personal, intimate details of their life, because you are there to talk about abortion. And it's a privilege in a lot of ways. So we do have more questions, so we'll get to it. A question from Cindy is, do you use a different method to dialogue with people that you already know versus strangers?
That's a good question. Use a different method. Probably not a lot. I mean, if I'm in like a relational apologetic situation, so lots of conversations, and it might be an email exchange, or I might be having Zoom calls with them, or we might be getting together for coffee over a period of time, then I think that really helps take the pressure off, because they could even stump me and it would be fine, because I can just be like, oh, that was really interesting. Let me think about that and get back to you next time we meet. Let's get that on the calendar. There's no pressure. Whereas if I'm a college student, a college campus, talking to a college student, I'm expecting this is probably my one shot with them. But I'm still fully agreeing with Lois. I love what she said. Most of the people that walk away from me are not, most people can't change their mind in one day about anything. Not when talking to a stranger. There's you have to be so open-minded. Most people are not that virtuous, just on either side of the system. And so it's okay. We see people become pro-life in every outreach we do, pretty much, but it's going to be a few. It's not the majority. And so I think my goal is for them to be closer to the pro-life position. Are they more open to the pro-life position now because they talk to me? Did I give them some good things to think about? And are they more likely to talk to another pro-life person? Or are they less likely to talk to pro-lifers because you ticked them off? Don't be that person. So there's that, certainly, so I'm taking my time more. I'm more willing to do the tangent things when I'm with a friend, because I know we're going to have time to get back to it, even if it's on a different day. What else? I've never been asked that before. Just trying to think, are there any other differences? It's pretty similar. I'm doing all those dialogue tips.
I feel like overall, even if you know them, you would want to talk to them in the way that Josh is teaching you, because the more times you can practice the way Josh is teaching us all to communicate, then the more comfortable you're going to feel doing it. And the principles are still true. You don't want to accidentally put people's walls up. You don't want to close them off to your thoughts.
Yeah.
All the principles are the same no matter how close you are, just you hopefully would have more trust. So you might have a little bit of leeway. It's a perfect time to practice is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. There's the thing that I said about arguments with question marks, I very purposely said generally avoid it, because there are exceptions to that rule. And those exceptions are usually when you've built up a lot of rapport, because the whole thing is can you pull off an argument that ends with a question mark that kind of leads them toward your view in a way that won't shut them down or make those walls go up. And if you have a lot of rapport with them, if you're really close and there's this trust that's been built, you might be able to get away with it. It's a dangerous move. You've got to be really, really skilled to pull it off, and they have to really trust you. But I will occasionally do that with my friends, and it's kind of judgment call territory. Besides that, yeah, it's pretty similar.
Great. Thank you. I have two more questions. First one's from Guadalupe. How do you argue or with a person who asks, how does it affect you if a stranger has an abortion?
If they ask me how it affects me personally if a stranger has an abortion? Oh, I would say it doesn't affect me personally. Like, I mean, by definition, right? It affects me in the same way that it affects me if I hear about some person that I've never heard of, but they're on the news and they were hurt. Or when I pull up Reddit at the end of every day and I come across a story of some vulnerable person or some innocent person being hurt or killed or something happening, like that affects me. It doesn't not affect me. I'm sad. I wish that didn't happen. Sometimes as kind of a very internally justice-oriented person, I want to find out if they're going to get in trouble. Like, was justice served? If this is like, a court case is going on or something. I'm not acting like, I'm personally traumatized every single time someone has an abortion. I don't think my personal feelings matter so much. What matters is, are there a couple of thousand kids getting killed every day legally in our country and wrongly? Like, am I right that abortion is wrong because it's killing an innocent person, and that a woman's bodily autonomy shouldn't trump those rights? If I'm right about that, I could be a stoic. I could be like just somebody who doesn't feel hardly anything, and it would still be equally wrong. Like, just like someone can feel overly, triggered by something, and it doesn't really prove that they're right, doesn't really prove that their reaction is reasonable or like the compass pointing true north. There's somewhere in the middle there. No, never mind. That's a tangent I don't need to get into. Go ahead and do the next question.
So this is the response. This response applies to everybody who says, don't like an abortion, don't have one, right, Josh?
Yeah, so
I think that's probably what Guadalupe was getting at, because I think that's the most common refrain people get to try when other people are trying to shut down the conversation. Don't like it, don't have.
Yeah, I want to say there, it's like, I'm not saying I'm personally against abortion. I think abortion literally kills innocent babies. And I think we shouldn't do that. I think that's so wrong. It's one of those things that should be against the law. Like, I don't think that everything that is wrong should be against the law. And I don't think that everything that will hurt you should be against the law. I don't think smoking should be illegal. I think it's not the best idea, but I don't think it should be against the law. I think people should be able to sometimes choose to do things that are unhealthy or whatever. Fine. I'm saying, but there are some things that are so wrong. They are so harmful to innocent people, like assault, for example, that they should be against the law. Like, there should be legal consequences for someone who does it, and we should try to minimize it and protect people. And I think if I'm right that this is killing babies, like innocent persons, then it seems like it falls in that category. So I'm not just personally against it. I really think it should be against the law. I think it's really, really bad, really wrong. But help me understand if I'm wrong about that.
That's great. Okay, so last question we have in the chat here. How do you best respond to someone who is just yelling obscenities to you in a passing vehicle, or the ones pulling out of Planned Parenthood? I think that this is from David. David must be one of our wonderful sidewalk counselors.
Yeah, we have a thing about that I'm trying to remember. Jacob talked about this in we have a sidewalk counseling course called the Sidewalk Counseling Masterclass. I highly recommend it. It's like $50. It's awesome. But I'm not a trained sidewalk counselor. So there's Jacob on our team who's really, really awesome. And we kind of focus on his techniques. So he surprised me. And he was actually surprised when he tried this. He didn't think this would work, but someone else had told him to try this thing, I think. He held it. He's got several signs. He works with other sidewalk counselors. So one of the signs that they will have sometimes is honk if you're pro-life. And I was like, I don't think that's a good idea because you don't want honking going on. Like, seems that's going to disrupt the conversations. He's like, yeah, but then it gets the pro-choice people to never honk because they don't want to be confused with pro-lifers. And I was like, what? That's brilliant. What? Those are the kinds of things you learn in the sidewalk counseling masterclass. So yeah, and they're like, pro-lifers don't usually honk anyway, whatever. But yeah, it gets people to stop honking so much. You don't need to respond if people flip you off as they drive by or yell in obscenity. Like, I think you can do something like, have a nice day. Like, you can do something like that. It's just a lot of times when I've seen people do that, it comes across snarky. You know, it's like, well, God bless you, like that kind of thing. It just like feels like just like this weird Christian retort. And I just want to seem like a loving person. So if you can pull off a God bless, like that, like a wave kind of a thing, I think that's fine. Or sometimes like if you kind of act like you're like innocently confused, like you don't realize they were like being mean. They're like, oh, thanks, you know, like that kind of thing. I think that can be, like, what's the opposite of off-putting? Like it can be kind of, on-putting is not a word, it should be.
Endearing.
Endearing, that's it, thank you. It can be kind of endearing.
I'm not suggesting this is a good idea, Josh, but when I first started doing sidewalk counseling, again, not suggesting this was a good idea, but I made this sign. I was like, I don't know, 16 when I was out there, but I made this sign. I had a whale on it. And because in Portland, you know, it's a very environmentally conscious city. And so the whale had like this big thought bubble that said, save the baby humans. And I was at the 4-way stop on Lovejoy, which probably some of the people who are on the phone right now are sidewalk counselors outside Lovejoy. But on the front was the whale, and on the back side, for when people would, you know, give me an aggressive hello, I would flip it, and it said, don't hate me because I love babies. I'm not suggesting you do that.
Let's say this. I've seen worse.
That could be one of your like bad signs that pro-lifers hold, Josh.
We have this huge list in our course of signs not to hold, but we also have some signs that are like really, really effective. So yeah, sidewalkcounselingmasterclass.com. Go get that course. And
we will send out a link to, I know we're running out of time, but we will send out, I promised people yesterday a link to some of the sources from our speakers yesterday. I will include a link to Josh's masterclass and anything else Josh covers in the next 2 sessions. I'll put those in there to the resource email, so you guys can just hang tight until the end of launch. Josh, thank you so much for joining us. We could go on and on and on. You are such a delight, and we're really excited to have you tomorrow again, and Wednesday and Thursday. Everyone can join.
I did want to put a little plug in that March 6th of 2021, Josh is coming to be one of our featured speakers at Together We Advocate, our pro-life summit that will be in Tualatin, Oregon, God willing, in person. And Jacob is also coming out, and we're going to be doing a special sidewalk advocacy seminar on the Friday before, on March 5th. We're still working on the logistical details, but put that on your calendar because it's going to be great for those of you that would like to improve your skills on sidewalk counseling. But that's it. I'm really excited for the next couple of days.